Hey, what's going on, you guys? So in this video, I wanted to share with you guys a couple of tips that'll really help you to solve transition questions with a lot more confidence and ease. I think that two of the biggest mistakes that students make when solving transition questions are, number one, they don't come prepared, and number two, they don't do things in a very systematic or organized way. In other words, they do things very randomly or chaotically. Okay, so I will share with you guys a couple of the best tips that I could share that has helped thousands of students that I've taught, right, to increase their confidence for transition questions as well as boost their scores on the SAT test. These are the exact same tips and tools that I've used to score in the top 1% of the SAT, the ACT, as well as the GMAT exams. And so they do kind of work. They've worked in my life. They've worked in the lives of thousands of my students. And I know that they'll work in your life as well. So here we go. Guys, the first tip is you have to self-study transition words. There's no way to get around it, right? So in other words, like you have to keep a notebook of, just keep a notebook, and in the notebook, have a section for transition words that you commonly experience, right? So if you guys have taken any SAT exams before, whether it's a blue book practice test, or just like from any other book, you guys have noticed, right, that the test makers will use the same sort of transition words over and over and over again, right? So some of those words, you guys probably can name some off the top of your head right now. We have words like however, therefore, right? Furthermore, moreover, additionally, in addition. We have a ton of transition word, nevertheless, right? We have a ton of these as a result, consequently, accordingly, right? So we have a lot of these transition words that show up over and over and over again, right? Well, then naturally, wouldn't it make logical sense for you to learn how to use these words precisely before you take a test, right? So self-studying these transition words is extremely important. Now, how to organize or how to self-study, you always want to learn in an organized way, right? So you want to break up the transition words into categories, right? And I would recommend creating 4 separate categories in your notebook, right? So one category would be for transition words that contrast, right? So write down words that kind of show a contrast of information, words like however, nevertheless, and start learning how each of these words are kind of used, right? We also have words that are kind of continuing, right? Continuers. We have words like, for example, furthermore, right? Also, in fact, right? These words kind of continue the discussion of the previous topic along the same lines, right? We also have cause and effect. And then we have sequence words, right? Sequence. So these are the 4 categories of words that you guys can now start to group transition words within. If you're not sure how to do this, don't worry about it. Just start by just learning a transition word, one transition word at a time. Then once you start learning how to use one transition word correctly, another word correctly, you'll start to see patterns, right? And then eventually what you guys can do is you guys can kind of group the transition words into these categories like this, right? But don't worry about it so much right now. The important thing is just you guys start to self-study. How do I use in contrast, right? How do I use eventually, right? How do I use nevertheless, right? How do I use as a result? And you guys can use ChatGPT for this or any other sort of AI tool, or you guys can just search on Google, right? You guys can search, ask ChatGPT, hey, ChatGPT, can you please explain in simple terms, in simple language, right, how to use the transition word as a result, right, in a precise way? Then ChatGPT will create a mini sort of like lesson, right? That'll teach you guys, right, how this transition word is used. And you just try to learn it one transition word at a time. And over time, you're gonna eventually build this stack of knowledge, right? This base of knowledge that you guys can now, that'll give you the power to now answer transition questions much more effectively. Okay. So that is, I think by far the biggest tip, the most important tip is to self-study these transition words. No one can teach it to you. You have to learn them yourself, right? So take the time to learn these words before you take these practice tests, okay? And then secondly, you guys, is you want to have a system of thinking, right? So the second tip is you want to work through transition questions in an organized or systematic way. And so systematic way just means you're doing things kind of step by step in a way that makes sense to you, right? In a way that's kind of practical, in a way that doesn't take up too much time, in a way that doesn't leave you confused or feeling overwhelmed or stuck, right? And you guys have seen me, if you guys have watched some of the previous videos, you guys have seen me kind of talk about this process, right? Where you're just focusing on doing things one thing at a time, right? Where we focus on the independent clause first, right? The first independent clause, we understand what that says. Then we focus on what the second independent clause says, right? And then we focus on the relationship, right, between the two independent clauses. Now, the benefits to studying these transition words outside on your own is now you kind of know, right? Not only do you know what the relationship between these two sentences are, but you'll also know what the relationship is not, right? So you'll know, for example, that the relationship is not a contrast, or you'll know that the relationship is not a consequence, right? Or a logical result of the previous information. So that's the power of self-studying. But when you combine self-knowledge plus a process, you become extremely powerful, right, on this test. Okay, and that's the lesson that I want to drill into your guys' head. You need to develop that knowledge, and you need to develop a process. Okay, those are the two things that will help you guys become really successful on this test. Okay, now let's go ahead and break that down for this question. So the first sentence, independent clause number 1, says cognitive behavioral therapy, while widely regarded as an effective treatment for anxiety and depression, focuses on identifying and changing negative thought patterns that contributes to mental health issues. So before we move on to the second sentence, when we have a transition question, we want to understand each sentence one at a time. Okay, that's the tip for solving transition questions. Do things one step at a time. Okay, so what does the first sentence talk about? Well, the first sentence is really telling us what the goal of CBT is, right? So the aim or the goal of CBT is to what? Right? Is you want to kind of change the negative thought patterns, right? The negative thinking, right? Straightforward enough. Yeah. So if you guys are wondering, like, what information, what do I have to understand about this sentence, right? I would tell you guys this tip. First, start with the independent clause. Make it as simple as for yourself as possible, right? Like, you have to know what an independent clause is. You have to know how to identify it, right? Which is what I consider to be the single most important thing for you to do to be successful on this test, right? But identifying the independent clause is extremely important, right? So the independent clause here is cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on identifying and changing negative thought patterns that contribute to mental health issues. But so if you understand that, that's where the core idea, that's where your main idea of a sentence lies, is your independent clause. And so usually if you just understand that, that's usually enough, right? But now we can kind of understand the meaning of a sentence a little bit more in detail, right? By looking at some of the other things that are talked about, right? So we know it's effective treatment for anxiety and depression, but we don't need to know all that. We can come back to it later, but as long as we understand the core message of the sentence, which is just telling us what CBT's goal is, right? The goal or the aim is to focus on the thinking patterns to change the negative thinking, right? And then now, so once we kind of understood that first sentence, then we can go on to the second sentence, right? Now, reading the second sentence, it says, patients who engage in CBT often experience significant improvements, right, in their symptoms. That's our independent clause, right? And then it says as they, which is just giving us the reason, right, why they experience improvements in their symptoms. It says because they learned to reframe their thinking and develop healthier coping mechanisms. Okay, so what do we have to understand about this? Well, we just have to first start with our independent clause, right? So what does the independent clause say? It says that people who do CBT, they feel better, right? They get better. They get better because they're changing their thinking. Right? So that is going to be these two sentences. Right now, once we wrap our minds around these two sentences, then we can start thinking about the relationship, right? Or another way to say this, you guys, you can also start thinking about what the relationship is not, right? So you have 4 answer choices, and you know that one of these has to be correct. And you also know that the other 3 have to be wrong. So there's 2 different ways that you can get to the correct answer. One way is to just to understand what the accurate or the correct relationship is, right? The second way is to understand what the relationship is not. And you just start to cross out wrong answers because it doesn't show that relationship. It doesn't show that relationship. It doesn't show that relationship, right? And so that's really what you're doing here. Now, some students might find it easier to use one method than the other. That's just, and sometimes, for one particular question, it can be easier to understand what the correct relationship is. Other times it might be easier to go the other way, right? Where you cross out wrong answers. Okay. But now you have a very sort of like specific ways to arrive at the correct answer, and you just have to choose, right? Just go with one, but don't just guess, right? Don't just be like, oh, well, I think this is right? Like actually think about, right? And this is where doing that sort of self-studying and understanding or learning how to use these transitions precisely outside of the test is going to really help, right? So for this particular question, like I know that the relationship is going to be cause and effect, right? So because cognitive behavioral therapy does this, right? Because cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on identifying and changing negative thinking. So because of that, what's the natural or the logical consequence, right? The natural or logical consequence is people who use CBT feel better, right? That's the natural or the logical result, right, of that previous sentence. And that's exactly what answer choice D is saying, right? So as a result, this type of transition word is synonymous with words like consequently, right? Therefore, thus, hence, accordingly, right? They're all used in the exact same way. These types of transition words, what they do is that the second sentence will show like the result of the first sentence, right? Or another way to say this is the second sentence will be a logical or like a natural consequence of the previous sentence, right? So if you think about it, if this is what CBT does, right? CBT focuses on this, the logical consequence of it then would be, well, hey, if you're changing your negative thinking that causes the negative health issues, right, then you must feel better. That's the logical result, right? So you guys can kind of see, right? That's how to use this transition word precisely. And so now that'll help me to get to this correct answer because I'm able to accurately see the relationship between these two sentences, okay? So remember, you guys, just to sum up, right? 2 important things. Number 1, you have to learn the transition words, how they're used. You don't have to study every single transition word in the English language, right? But you can start with the transition words that you guys have seen on previous SAT exams, right? So the College Board has 6 practice tests on their website you guys can download. A lot of you guys have already practiced some of those. Now what you guys can do is go back to those tests, look at the transition questions, and start to write down the transitions that kind of commonly appear. You guys can probably name about 5 or 6 of them right now, right? Keep a notebook of it. And just when you have some time, one by one, learn how each transition word is used precisely. Don't overwhelm yourself with this, right? Make it just real simple. Just focus on doing one thing at a time, If you don't take the time to do this, I guarantee you that you're not going to see the improvements that you want to see for transition questions. And I know that not having known you, but it's because I've worked with over 7,000 kids. And I just know that the students who take the time to learn these transition words outside of class are the ones who see the biggest improvements. The students who don't self-study are the ones who continuously struggle to get transition questions correct. It's all you have to do is take a little bit of time to learn some of these transition words on your own. And then when you take the next test, you'll start to be able to practice now what you learned. And then from that test, some of the mistakes that you made or some of the transition words that you don't know, you can now take those transition words and add it to your list, right? So now you have this growing list of transition words that you guys can kind of study. Okay, that's the first tip. And the second tip you guys remember is work systematically. Do things step by step, one thing at a time, right? I showed you guys that here. That'll decrease the chances of you misunderstanding something. That'll decrease the chances of you making mistakes, which will decrease the chances of you getting this question incorrect, right? That'll also increase the chances of you getting this question correct, right? But also when you focus on doing things one thing at a time, right? And you understand one thing before you move on to the next thing, how does that make you feel? You feel a lot more confident, don't you? You feel a lot more certain, don't you? That's exactly the feeling that I want you guys to have when you're taking the test. Okay, so work through these systematically or one step at a time, like I just showed you guys. Practice it in an untimed environment before you jump into a timed test. That'll give you guys the sort of system of thinking, the habits, right, that you need to be successful when you take the actual test. All right. So guys, remember to like this video and subscribe. My goal is to help millions of students to get fewer than 5 wrong on the reading and writing section of the digital SAT for free. I am giving you guys top 1% tips. This is exactly the stuff. I'm not going to hold anything back. This is all the stuff that I used that in my life to help me score in the top 99 percentile of the SAT, ACT, and the GMAT exams, as well as the strategies and the knowledge that I've taught to over 7,000 students to help them achieve the scores that they thought weren't very possible, right? And I'm trying to do this. So I'd really, really appreciate your help. The more that you like these videos, the more that you subscribe, it'll spread these videos out to other students who need this. So if you found value in this video in any way, right, please do me that favor and subscribe and share, like this video so you can spread the words to other students as well. Okay, now that's going to make me feel a lot more inspired to create better videos for you, which will help you guys to learn even better, right? Which will make you guys want to share even more, right? Which will help to spread the word even more, which is going to make me feel even more excited to help, right? It's going to create this virtuous cycle where we're just all kind of benefiting, right? Where we all create this win-win-win situation where everyone wins, right? And the way that the way that I'll get paid is going to be through $1 trillion company in Google, right? YouTube, that owns YouTube, not from students. I think that you guys deserve this type of education for free. It should be accessible to everybody, and it's something that I do want to make accessible, right, for you guys. So you guys can help me out in that way. Also, you guys, please comment in the comment box below. Let me know one thing that you learned that was helpful for you in this video. That really helps me to understand what works for you guys. Also, it helps me to understand you guys a little bit better. It'll also help you when you write down what you learned and you're honest about it, you're sincere about it. It's going to help you to remember this stuff better. And then also, please write down one thing that you want to learn. What is one thing that you're still kind of having trouble with or that you're kind of curious about that you want me to kind of teach you guys or go over in a future video? I read all of these comments from y'all and they inspire me to create future videos, right? So please engage with me that way. Education is not a one-way street, right? Education is a two-way street. Learning is a two-way street. Right? So I'm not just a teacher, I'm also a student. I'm learning from you guys every single day. So if you guys kind of tell me what you want to learn, what you want me to teach you, that teaches me, right, what I need to prepare for, right, to teach you so that you guys can learn. Right? So we're going to kind of work together, right, on creating this incredible SAT result that you guys are all after. Okay. And that's something that I'm committed to doing. All right, you guys, until the next video, make sure that you guys are always stay curious, learn things one thing at a time. And yeah, you guys got this. Take care, y'all. See ya.